Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple more minutes. Thank you so much for your patience. We'll let a few more folks trickle in. We'll get started in about a minute or two. Thank you. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us virtually here on Zoom. My name is Leo Angulo. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Artistic Programs Manager here at New York Theater Workshop, and I am one of the co-leaders of the 2050 Artistic Fellowship and excited to talk to you today about it. Salma.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you're all having a smooth start to your week. My name is Salma Zodi, and I'm the literary manager here at New York Theater Workshop, also co-leading the fellowship with Leo, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Great. So just a quick overview of what this hour will be. Um, let's see. So we'll start with giving a really brief overview of what New York Theater Workshop is, and then we'll talk about what the 2050 Artistic Fellowship is. And then we'll go into depth and talk a little bit more about the application process and each of the steps. We'll then welcome a past artistic fellow to just have a bit of a conversation, and I'll ask him a few questions about his experience of the fellowship. And then we'll save the last probably 20 minutes or so for Q&A for you all that are watching. So that being said, as you're watching and as you're listening, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function and be inputting your questions there. We may be answering them as we go, but just start putting your questions in as they come up. You should be able to see each other's questions. So if there's a question that you're like, oh, I have that question too, feel free to upvote, and that might give us a sense of volume of what questions are like rising to the top. But yeah, that's what we'll be doing today. And if you have questions for our past fellow, you can start thinking about them, or maybe as we're having our conversation with him, some might drum up. But so we'll get started with a little bit about New York Theater Workshop.
Leo, before we proceed, just want to name that the session is recorded for everyone who's here with us. So it'll also live on our website if you want to revisit it again, but also letting you know that it's recorded.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So let's start. Just wanted to as some of you may already know, but we just wanted to name that New York Theater Workshop is both a producing theater and a developmental space. We have a rigorous and robust development arm. And our developmental programs include a bunch of things. One of them is the Mondays at 3 readings that some of you may already be familiar with or not. It's a one-day reading where artists come into our space. It happens every other Monday in the fall and the spring, and they just get to work on their piece. We get to do a reading at 3 p.m. We do a sharing, and oftentimes we do critical response feedback afterwards if the artist needs to do so. And that feedback is centered around the artist needs and the questions that they have that can help them move forward and develop the piece beyond the time they had at the workshop. Then we have 2 summer residencies. One of them is at Adelphi University. The other one is at Dartmouth. Each of these residencies is 2 weeks long, and every week we get a different group of artists. It's more hands-on, more like they spend more time with the piece than they do with Mondays at 3. And each of these residencies look slightly different, but they're also the same in their core. It's very community based, and it was just wonderful time out of the city for us to see work and work on artistry. And then we've got the 2050 Artistic Fellowship, which is why we're gathered today, and we're going to delve into further after this. And we also have companies of residencies that we just love you to be familiar with and get to know them more. So we've got DAC, which is the Dominican Artist Collective, Jupiter Performance Space, North Theater Company, and Safe Harbors. And before we proceed, I just would like to animate some of the values that we operate with, the values that we center in our conversation with our artists and our fellows in our community. We exist to help people better understand the world. We are committed to uplifting historically marginalized voices and stories. We support many types of generative artists at all points of their artistic lives, and we center curiosity and experimentation. And now Leo's gonna take it away and delve into the fellowship.
Thank you, Salma. And also to name, these are just a few sort of values that sort of are more kind of artistic values that we have. And also we do have a core value statement that has been worked on for several years, and that can be found on our website. And that's sort of a roadmap of how we engage with work and how we sort of function as a theater. But great, thank you. Let's see. So what is the 2050 Artistic Fellowship? So over the course of 25 years, the workshop has had actually many different types of artistic fellowship, but the current 2050 Artistic Fellowship, the structure that it is now, has been the primary artistic fellowship for almost 10 years now. And in this fellowship, we support up to 6 early career artists who exhibit outstanding artistry and whose voices are underrepresented in the theater industry. This fellowship is geared towards artists that generate their own work. We think pretty broadly about what a generative artist can be. Obviously, a playwright writing their plays, and also we think directors can be generative artists, and solo performers who might be writing and performing their own work. So we think pretty broadly, but we are geared towards generative artists. This fellowship also prioritizes community building, artistic exploration and development, and meaningful conversation. And the fellowship, I think, is actually one of the more exciting sort of programs that we have here at the workshop, because it is the deepest and most robust engagement that we have with artists. As Salma was saying, on Mondays at 3, we have one every other week, right? We do about 40 or 50 readings and workshops in the year. So we're meeting all kinds of artists through those avenues. In this fellowship, we meet this cohort of artists, and we are with them all year, and they're in residence with us all year, and they're really folded into the artistic life of the theater. So it becomes a really meaningful connection that we're able to build with the artists that come through the fellowship. Some more details about the Artistic Fellowship and sort of what makes it up, what are some required and mandatory parts of the fellowship. We do have a retreat, a fellows retreat that is meant to bookend your experience as a fellow. So we'd have one before your fellowship starts. We actually have those dates. So the fellows retreat next year is scheduled for June 13th through June 15th of 2025. And attendance at these retreats is mandatory, and your participation as a fellow is contingent on your ability to be at these retreats. So you'd have a retreat before your fellowship, and then you'd have a retreat at the end of your fellowship. But what's exciting is that the two cohorts, the cohort that is currently the 2024-2025 cohort, will have their sort of end of fellowship retreat, while you'd be having your sort of beginning of fellowship retreat. So there's sort of a passing of a torch there that's really exciting. This retreat is also sort of nestled within our Adelphi University residency. So we'll be developing work, and also we'll be meeting our new fellows and saying goodbye to our fellows, our current cohort. Another required and mandatory aspect of the fellowship are these monthly fellowship meetings. These happen once a month, usually on a Monday evening around 6 to 9, 6 to 9:30. But this is an opportunity for you to sort of meet as a cohort, to connect, to catch up, and also it's the opportunity to invite outside guests in. That can take many forms. If you just want to invite a few people in to engage in a conversation, or a panel of producers, that's an option. And also if you wanted to invite one artist in to have sort of more hands-on workshop or masterclass, That's also an option as well. An example last year is we had a wonderful artist named Ellen Winter. They came in and they did a musical theater composing masterclass, and they helped sort of talk about devised exploration of music with collaborators. And that was really exciting for folks. We also one year had Alex Coons, who runs Babetown, who is a chef and sort of community organizer and space maker. She came in and she taught us how to make a lasagna, and she talked about the importance of community organizing and the artistry that goes into being a chef. And that one was also a really exciting meeting as well. Again, these are monthly fellowship meetings that are required, and also you as fellows would be able to dictate what it is that you want to be doing in those meetings, who is exciting to be meeting. There's also the opportunity for work sharings or work development. And this can take any form. It can be a staged reading. It can be a 29-hour workshop. It could be a simple table read, even a conversation around a specific topic. But each fellow is given the opportunity to share one project or one piece of work throughout the year. We would be collaborating with you to figure out what makes the most sense to do that's exciting for you to work on within the auspices of the fellowship. And you'd get certain producing support from myself and from the workshop to make these work sharings happen. There's also a lot of mentorship from the New York Theater Workshop artistic staff. So of course, myself and Salma as the co-leaders of the fellowship are there to be mentors and to facilitate your experience. And also Patricia McGregor, who's our artistic director, and Rachel Silverman and Aaron Malkin, who are co-associate artistic directors, would be engaging with you all throughout the year and many touch points, and you'll remain in conversation with them as well. The other sort of really fun and exciting opportunity that comes with the fellowship is this robust invitation to really be a part of the artistic life of New York Theater Workshop. There are many, it's like a sort of multi-pronged approach. So there's a lot of invitations around our season productions. So you'd be getting invited to first rehearsals. You'd be getting invited to invited dress rehearsals. You'd be getting invited to the opening night parties. And that's all stuff that you're able to sort of come to and join us and celebrate our shows in the season. There's also an opportunity to come to the community events and community programming surrounding our season work. You also will be invited to the gala every year, one of our biggest fundraising event. And also you are invited to welcome to be part of the artistic staff meetings. So we have multiple sort of departmental meetings. We have an artistic department meeting, we have a literary meeting, and fellows are invited to be a part of those meetings and participate and engage. And that's a really good opportunity to continue to deepen the relationship with us, and also to just get a sort of inside look into what it takes to run an off-Broadway theater and sort of how we're making our artistic decisions. So that's sort of a sampling of what the invitation is. And then also lastly, 2050 Artistic Fellows receive both a $6,500 personal stipend as well as an additional $6,500 artistic development fund. Now that fund is in place to support your artistic development, which can look like many different things. The big thing that folks often use it for is these work sharings that I'm talking about, which is like a 29-hour workshop or a one-day reading. But you can also use this fund to purchase theater tickets if you want to be seeing theater throughout the year, if you have research books or things that you want to purchase. If you have a research trip around a specific like artistic project, you can use the Artistic Development Fund for that. For example, one of our fellows last year, Celeste Jennings, is working on a play about African cuisine, specifically Ghanaian cuisine. And so she took a trip to Ghana and met with a bunch of restaurant owners there and did like a food tour of Ghana. And she was able to use part of our Artistic Development Fund to help fund and underwrite that trip as she sort of continued to develop this piece. Great. And now Salma is going to do sort of both a brief overview of the application process, and then we'll talk sort of step by step.
Well, thank you so much, Leo, for that. So yeah, the step-by-step, the application process is divided into 4 steps. The first one is the one we're in right now, which is the preliminary application. It is due on October 17th at 11:59 p.m. Please submit it by that time at the latest. And we're here to answer your questions, and you can always email us as you work through your applications to meet that deadline. The second step would be the full application invitation. It's going to be sent out late November, and these applications will be due December 11th. And then the third step would be group interviews. They're going to happen between February 5th and February 7th. And then finally, the individual interviews, which will take place February 27th up till March 5th. So now let's delve into each process of the application. So the prelim application right now, we ask you to submit a resume and a statement that is 750 words or less, responding to the questions that are jogged down here, which is what kind of work are you interested in making at this moment and why? Are there questions that you try to pursue and interrogate in your work? And how does this fellowship at New York Theater Workshop specifically appeal to you as an artist right now? So these questions are an opportunity for us to get to know you better and understand your values as an artist and how your work intersects with these questions. It's helpful for us to the best way for us to assess your artistry is for you to answer all these questions, especially that we don't get the chance in this part of the application to look at like full samples of your work. And then yeah, these applications will be reviewed by members of our staff, and each application will be reviewed by two different people. So we're going to have different touch points with the application and the applicant.
Um,
And
Yeah, I just want to add, thank you. Like, I just want to add that it's important to name to like, please make sure you're answering all three of these questions. You'll be surprised how many people choose to answer one or two, but not all three. And that only helps your chances for us to get a fuller sense of who
right,
you are as an artist and as an individual, as Salma is saying. I really encourage you to think about each of these questions and give thoughtful answers to each of them, because this is sort of how we are evaluating at this stage who we want to sort of continue to know more. And yes, just reiterating that every application is read in full by two people, so there's not one single person that's making any sort of decisions on someone's application.
yeah.
Right. Next step.
And 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 just to say, like, a question like, what does this fellowship at New York Theater Workshop specifically appeal to you as an artist? Like, I would encourage you to learn about the work that we do and learn about the artists that we have been in our community for the wide range for the last few decades, and just for you to understand, to get a sense of the kind of work that we're interested in and the kind of work that speaks to us. Just so you can answer that question. So yeah, okay, next step. Then there's the full application. As mentioned, you will be invited, like those who will make it to the second round will be invited to that in November. And those who are invited to submit it will be I just mentioned it. So you will be asked to submit a fellowship plan outlining how you'd like to spend your fellowship here. So again, for that step, we'd encourage you to read about like what is it that we offer in this fellowship, so then you can build a robust plan around this. And the plan wouldn't always necessarily have to be just around the work that you want to pursue, but how you can engage with New York Theater Workshop throughout the year through all the touch points that Leo have mentioned earlier. We will also ask you to provide work samples. So this is when we actually get to know your work better. So for playwrights, we'll ask for full-length play. For directors, we'll ask for production images or videos with corresponding descriptions. And for solo performers, text or images or videos, whatever you think best exemplifies and represents your work, please submit that. And the full applications will also be reviewed by our staff and a selection of our former artistic fellows who have gone through this process and have actually gone through the full year fellowship. So they have more of an intimate understanding of what this fellowship is. And these applications will be due December 12th, which is a Tuesday.
Great. And I just to add some further context, this fellowship plan, I think Salma's tip is very wise, right? Take a look at what is a part of this fellowship and what you can take advantage of, and what you plan to do and how you plan to spend the year. So we're excited to know about what projects you want to be working on. We're excited about what parts of the offerings you want to really engage with. But it's also important to say that like this is just sort of a sketch of a plan for us to get to know. We by no means
Right.
we won't hold you to it. So it's like if you have a project, we're not going to make you work on that project. It's just to give us a full sense of what you might do with the year. This fellowship is facilitated a lot by Solomon and I, by the monthly touch points. And also, I think a lot of what the experience that you get out of it is sort of how you plan and shape your year. We often say that fellows are the artistic directors of their own fellowship. So we want to make sure that we're picking folks that have a really clear and intentional idea of how they want to use the time and the space and the resource. So that's why the fellowship plan is important. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning this, Leo, because also this is not like a contract, a binding contract. When you send us a simple example of that I always use, one of our past fellows submitted as a full sole performer, and then eventually what they ended up doing is a reading for an adaptation of a show that had 12 actors. So completely different from what they had originally applied for, but they grew through the fellowship in a certain way, and they decided to explore that develop like that artistic arm um in that way, and that was helpful. And that's also just to name that the reason why we value this fellowship is because, as Leo mentioned, yes, you are the artistic director of this fellowship, but we also want you to grow to be the artist that you want to be in whichever way that you want to be. We're not going to hold you to anything, so we're going to follow your lead. So feel free to dream and do and explore whatever you need to explore, and change your mind halfway through if you need to. Great. And then there are the interview processes. So the third round of the application will be a group interview. Um, and these are opportunities for us as a team to get to know you further, and also to see how you can be in a conversation with other artists, and how as a group you can speak about art and aesthetics. So each of these interviews will have 6 to 7 fellowship candidates and the entire artistic team in that space. And it will all be held over Zoom. And then last but not least, they are the individual interviews. And those who are invited to the individual interviews and that last step of the application process, it's going to allow us to ask you more specific questions and personalized questions about you as an artist, but about the work you're interested in. And most importantly, it will finally give you an opportunity to ask us all the questions that you have around the fellowship that you may not have gotten the chance to do with the round of interview prior. And the interviews will be conducted by Leo, myself, and a former artistic fellow. And these will be held in person or Zoom, but oftentimes I think if you're in the city, you would like to have it in person. Um, yeah, so that is the process.
Yeah.
Leo, please feel free to add anything else that I may have missed.
No, I think you did a great job. I think just it's helpful, I think, to give a full scope, right, of what this process is, and if you're invited to each consecutive step, sort of the timeline of what you'd be doing. And we recognize that it's a long process, right? We're in September right now, and the individual interviews will be in March. So we know that it's a very long process. And so one, we appreciate all the work that you will be putting into these application materials. We really value the opportunity to get to know you all individually as applicants as thoroughly and as carefully as we can, which is why we have all these steps. And so I just want to name and uplift the work that you will be doing throughout the process. And I know that it's not easy, and I know that it takes a certain level of responsibility and commitment. So thank you in advance. And also it's a really exciting way to get to know people. We'll have many applications at different rounds. And we can only end up with up to 6 fellows. And so it's, even if for folks that might not get a fellowship, it is really still an exciting way for us to meet artists, right? And to get to know your work. There have been many times where someone may have not gotten a fellowship, but because we met them or we read their play and really liked it, we then did a Mondays at 3 reading of it, or we then developed a sort of artistic relationship outside of the fellowship with these people. So I also sort of mentioned that just so, as you know, as you're going through this application process, we know it can be tedious, but we really are excited to get to know you further and further at each step. So we thank you for your intentionality and for your work that you're putting into it.
Yeah, and to quote Patricia McGregor on this, it's like this, us getting to know you through this, you are already part of our community. The fact that you've applied, you're already part of the larger New York Theater Workshop community, and you will be getting further invitations to engage with us in different and other meaningful ways. So all that to say is our we sorry, our doors are open for all our artists that are
Great. So that's sort of the top line overview. I see a lot of questions in the Q&A. We'll begin to sort of cull through those and see what we're able to answer. Hopefully we can get through most, if not all of them. But now at this point, I'd love to invite one of our former artistic fellows to hop on screen and to have a little chit chat with him. This is Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Andrew Rodriguez, he was a fellow in the 2022-2023 season. He was a directing fellow. He's an actor and director based in New York City. He's a creator and collaborator for dance, theater, and film. Andrew's dedicated to developing and creating new work, and he collaborates with artists to create worlds that explore elements of human behavior through live performance and movement. Andrew is currently pursuing his MFA in directing at the David Geffen School of Drama at Yale. So he is zooming in from New Haven as we speak. Um, Hi Andrew, how are you?
I'm well, Leo. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Andrew was a great fellow and is a great friend. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us a bit about your experience. But I think a great place to start would just like, who are you as an artist? And like, what sort of work do you like to explore?
Yeah, so I'm interested in generating new work, primarily dance theater, new plays, and new musicals. So my work is always physical. I'm interested in, as you mentioned, exploring elements of human behavior. And it's my hope that in rehearsals I can create the conditions where everyone on the creative team, actors, designers, dramaturgs, where we can all reckon and gather around questions we don't have answers to, and that will then help us create a world around that.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm curious if you could tell me, what are some of the highlights of your fellowship experience, of your fellowship year? What are some of your favorite memories, um, that you had?
Oh my gosh, yes, so many. You kind of stole my thunder on one of them when we invited Alex Coons from Babetown to come cook a meal together. But what was so important about that was it was the artistic staff, all the artistic fellows, and that's really where we kind of, I guess I would say, reached the pinnacle of our community building together, where we're sitting around a table, cooking a meal, chopping onions, peeling back garlic, and then we got to share this beautiful meal together. And where else can that happen, right? And I think that informed, our relationship as a cohort, our relationship with the artistic staff. Um, you know, just gathering around the table that you're probably sitting at, Leo, right now.
Correct.
That was like so life-changing. And then the other two memories are we went to a WNBA game. We went to go see New York Liberty, and that was just epic. I mean, again, another layer of community building where we saw an event and then we interrogated how in what ways it overlaps with theater and live performance and what we're trying to do as artists. And we also just enjoyed a really good basketball game. And then my last memory is at retreat, where we had game night. Leo, I think you brought like 7 to 10 different board games.
Yes, I am the game
And
master.
you literally are. And we stayed up till like 2 a.m. playing a game. And it was so much fun where we could just, sort of abandon the work for a moment and just be with each other and laugh and play a game and also get really competitive about it.
Yeah, those are some highlights. Yeah, it's fun because you're meeting a lot of these people for the first time, and then you get to really know their true colors. They come out in games. But yes, the fellows retreat are always a highlight for me as well.
And then you
Um,
see that again at Adelphi.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Um, I'm curious, what would you tell someone who's interested in applying for this opportunity, Andrew?
I would say that you get the experience you make. And so you lean into all the aspects that the fellowship has to offer and really think about what fuels you as an artist and be specific about the kind of art that you want to make and all the other things beyond your artistry that excite you and fuel you, because I think that's important too. It's also important to have fun while you're putting together either this application or even thinking about applying to this fellowship. because ultimately this is a time where you build community and get to be in conversations with a cohort of artists, and have deep artistic and meaningful conversations. And I think that can kind of get lost a little bit, but that's really the cornerstone, I think, of this fellowship. And as Salma mentioned, read the mission of New York Theater Workshop and see where you find alignment, articulate the ways in which your own artistic mission and what you're interested in and where your passion lies, lives perpendicular to New York Theater Workshops. So those are the three things I would say.
Great. I have a sort of two-part question. The first part, I did not give you the question in advance, sorry. But it just came to me. I'm curious if you could speak to where you were in your sort of artistic life when you were applying for the fellowship and how you felt you knew you were ready. And if you felt you were still on the greener side, like why you decided to still apply, and like and the sort of the second half of that question is how the fellowship helped you grow. Because I do see a question, there's a question about like, how do you know when is the right time to apply? Like, is this for emerging early career artists? So I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to like where you felt you were when you applied and sort of your thought process behind that. And then if you could speak to how you think the fellowship will help you grow.
Absolutely. So I applied in, I guess what, it was like end of 2021, early 2022. So, where I was at, I had just finished an apprenticeship at the Juilliard School where I was in the drama division. So I had a year working within that conservatory program. And then I was hired at Atlantic Theater Company where I was the artistic director for the conservatory student productions and the student affairs coordinator. So I had been working there for a couple months before I applied to the fellowship. So I came from, really working in schools. I started directing in 2019, my last year of undergrad. So I was fairly new to directing. To get this fellowship in 2022, I was still new to directing. I was still figuring out um, kind of what my own artistic voice was. And I had been in New York only for a year at that point. And so yeah, I would say I was very much emerging. And but I was going back to like what I said earlier. I was clear in what I wanted out of this fellowship. There were clear specific goals that I came in with. So that was really helpful. And then how the fellowship helped me grow was, it made me feel like New York Theater Workshop is an artistic home. The space and the staff really allowed me to be bold and brave and uncompromising with myself and my work. So it kind of refined my artistic voice and my artistic practice. Um, I left with a really fun project that I'm continuing to like shape and hone in New York. It's actually like getting another workshop, and that's really exciting. And I had never gone out of the country before applying to the fellowship. And one of the things I did with my fellowship funds was to train and research outside of the United States, where I went to Italy and went to this dance center called Orsolina 28 and took classes with Oha Naharin and Batsheva Dance Company. And that was just life-changing for my work. And so it was really a full year of researching, expanding what I think my own artistic range is. And there was a safety net because I felt seen by not only the institution of New York Theater Workshop, but the people that were employed there and the community of cohorts that I was with.
Great, thank you. I'd totally forgotten that you did that, but yes, you did go to Italy and take those dance classes. Again, it's really a lot of opportunities and ways to use your artistic development fund. And you were still able to sort of squeeze all those things in. Great. I think the last question that I have before we open up to questions. So folks, if you have any specific questions for Andrew and his experience, please feel free to also drop those in the chat and I can ask him those as well. But I'm curious if you could leave folks watching with any sort of tips as they embark on this application process, what you might share with them.
I would say, again, be specific and don't settle for anything less than precise and clear thought, especially in those artist statements. Write out your goals, but also remain flexible. Allow your goals to be a roadmap, but be open to those detours that you will take, because you will. I started with a project. So I knew exactly what I wanted to explore in terms of project development. And it was a source of passion, but then I actually refined it, going through the application process, particularly in the fellowship plan, right? I clearly articulated those goals. So whoever was reading it could see where I was coming from and where I hoped to leave the fellowship in terms of the project development. And then, I think the work samples are so crucial as well, especially for directors. And my work samples were images. And to describe them, I paired it with the audio that was playing in the actual production that I did, which was, I think, really helpful because I work heavily with sound design for the choreography, and it gave the panelists a sense of my work. And again, that's the key. And then the last thing I would say is speak to the way in which this fellowship specifically supports your growth as an individual and how you intend to be part of a community of artists. It's essential for the panelists to understand how you will also play a role in the cohort, as well as the artistic life of the theater.
Very well said. I think everything that Andrew shared is really smart, and I think that last point is something that, for those that are here on this info session, that's a tip that like people often leave that part out, right? Like we're trying to build a cohort, right? We're trying to find incredible artists, and also we're trying to assemble and curate a group. So you could be one of the most compelling artists ever, and if you speak nothing at all about cohort, or if it doesn't seem like you're interested in being a part of this community and a group of cohorts, then that affects how your application is read, right? So it's like just really be holistic about how you're articulating both yourself as an artist and how you view yourself within the fellowship at New York Theater Workshop, within the cohort. So really sort of honing in on those specifics, as both Salma and Andrew have mentioned throughout this info session. Andrew, I have a question that came up from someone, and they're curious about what some of your goals were. You keep talking about your goals. Do you remember what they were?
Oh gosh, I do. I knew so I came in with a project as I mentioned, and one of the goals was I have this first draft. It was an adaptation project, so I as the director took this novel in verse that was used as a literary artifact, and I had that draft, and I said I want to find creative solutions to make this literary artifact a live performance. I don't know how I'm going to do that specifically in the room, but I know that's my first goal and that's my entry point. And so then I talked a little bit about like the ingredients that I would use, like choreography, sound design, how many actors, right? I went that specific. And some of the other goals that I was talking about was, I was new to New York. I had only been in the city for about a year, and we were coming out of the pandemic of masking and all that stuff. So I really didn't get to see a lot of theater when I first moved to New York because nothing was on. I didn't really have a sense of artistic community because I was new here, and I really wanted to get to know who the people are in the city that were creating the work that I was really inspired by or curious about. And so I really talked a lot about how I thought this fellowship would be the bursting of a gate, like wide open to just meet new people. And I articulated this in the sense too in the application where my rehearsal process during the week was open, and so staff members could come see it. I think at the time, I was teaching as well. A couple of my students came in and sat in rehearsal, and so it really was, again, going back to this last tenant that I put, was how are you building artistic community? And that was a clear goal that I remember articulating in the application was, if I do this project, I want a lot of people to be curious about it like me, not just the artists that are involved, but the people who would eventually see it if it turned into a live performance. And so, yeah, those were the two that came to mind.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think now I'm just going to go through and just kind of go down the list of all these great questions that you all put in the Q&A, and sort of answer them to the best of my ability. I'll probably just answer a lot of them, Salma, and maybe I'll lob a few over your way, but I'll probably just do a lot of them just for efficiency. Great. So the first question is from Allison, and it's asking about how can we apply to participate in some of these opportunities. I think those are in reference to the different development of programming that we would do that Salma was talking about. Salma, I don't know if you want to give some context, but the long and short is that I'll go ahead. Sorry, is that these are we do a call for proposals that is not open to the public. So it's actually a smaller curated list of artists that are sort of in our network that we then send this sort of call for proposals out for the summer residencies and for the Mondays at 3. So these aren't necessarily opportunities that are open to everyone, but Salma, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, they're not open to the public widely, but oftentimes we do send them to artists that we have met or artists that we know. So we will meet you through this process. We will also, if we end up seeing a reading of your play or had coffee with you and you're interested in these opportunities, we will then invite you to submit. So all that to say is, yeah, it's not open to the public, but if we met and you're interested, we're happy to share the opportunity.
Thank you. Fabian asks, what level of artist should apply? Emerging, experienced, etc. So we use the word early career, and we recognize that early career can mean a lot of things, and folks can be early career at many stages in their life. Oftentimes folks come after having pivoted careers and are sort of re-entering this artistic theatrical career. But I think a good rule of thumb that I always say as I'm like evaluating these applications is we're looking for folks that are beginning to have a developed sense of artistry, right? That they have their own artistic vision and aesthetics and artistic mission, that they can build upon that, right? We don't really, this opportunity isn't suited for folks that are, newly green and may not really know what they want to do or how they want to work. This isn't an opportunity for you to like learn. Like it's really to build upon the sort of foundation that you've already established. And so that can look like many different things, right? I'll just say this, the question of like MFA and graduate degrees always come up. And certainly a lot of the people that come through the application process and end up getting fellowships had MFAs, but not everyone, right? Andrew's a perfect example. He got the fellowship and now he's pursuing his MFA, right? So it's a pretty wide sort of squishy answer, but we really think of it as early career. Like you've started to develop your own craft and you're in a place where you need the opportunity to continue to develop it, is what sort of we like to say. A question from Thaddeus. I found that developing new work costs a lot of money in terms of rental space. For your fellowship, do you offer space at no cost to develop work? That's a great question. We have two wonderful spaces within New York Theater Workshop. We have our 3rd floor rehearsal studio, and then we have our small 4th Street Black Box Theater. And both of those spaces are sort of big spaces that would be available for the fellows to do their workshops in. There's a whole step of like scheduling and doing a puzzle of what space is available when, but no, we would not have to be doing outside space. It is important to name that our space is not necessarily physically accessible. There's steps to go onto the 1st floor, and then the 3rd floor rehearsal room is on the 3rd floor, and there's no elevator. So if for whatever reason one of your collaborators had an accessibility need, we would need to look at getting outside space. Great. What is the budget for the projects we get to work on? So any project that you want to work on would have to be within the $6,500 artistic development fund that you use. So that is to say, last year we had someone that decided to use all of her money on her artistic, on her development, which is perfectly fine. She did this sort of big, campy early 2000s movie musical that she adapted into a play. And she said she wanted to have a punk band there to sort of underscore everything. And so it was like 8 actors, a punk band. She really sort of used her fund to the fullest extent exclusively on her work sharing. There's other people that are like, actually want to make sure I only use half of it for my work sharing and then save half of it so I can do research, so I can get theater tickets. I would be working with you to figure out the scale at which you want to do something. We'd create a budget within the $6,500, and then we would go from there. May I submit a CV instead of a resume? I think it's up to you. It's something as long as we really get a sense of what artistic opportunities you've had, what experience you have. So I would say either format is fine. Unless Salmi, you disagree, but I think so. I think this was a question that was asked before we got to the slide, but it says what will be asked for in the full application. Just to reiterate, the full application, you're then going to be asked to submit a fellowship plan that outlines how you would like to spend the year, as well as a work sample, which for playwrights is a full-length play, and for directors, it's a work sample, which is either pictures or video and some description.
And Leo, there's a question in the bottom about what, like the level of which stage sorry, ideally, what play would it be? Is it a fully developed play? It's the question we were discussing earlier today. And I know you have answers to that if you want to iterate on that right now, and I will just mark it as the answer.
Yeah, thank you. If you could mark it. Yeah, I think that's a good question, right? Like what play do you submit? My answer, like Leo Angulo's answer, is like submit the play that I think you're most excited about, the play that most specifically and accurately expresses who you are as an artist. I think we are looking for artistic imagination and artistic vision. And so, of course, we want something that is complete and in good shape. And also, like, we don't need something that's perfectly polished and has been developed for years, right? Like it's really something that you feel like puts your best artistic foot forward. So that can be something that you've developed over many years, or that can be something that's a fresh draft. So I would just think about that. Think about how you want to showcase yourself and introduce yourself to us as an artist, and think about the play that best suits that. And even if it's a newer draft, even if you feel like it still needs work, that's perfectly fine. A lot of what we do, a lot of our sort of philosophy is that we are process driven in so much of what we do. And so we certainly aren't expecting, production ready scripts at any point. Let's see. There was a question about the interviews. Again, group interviews will be on Zoom. The final individual interviews can be in person or on Zoom if needed. Some here that are blueberries love. Thank you so much. Can we choose to submit a 1-act play, or are we looking for a 2-act? I think ultimately it's up to you. Again, it's sort of what I was saying before. It's like, what is really putting your best foot forward? And if you feel like there's a 1-act play that really does that, then I think that's perfectly fine. What stage of development do you target? I'm a solo performer with a completed draft that's currently being staged and workshopped. Would this fellowship benefit me, or am I better off applying to one of the residencies? I think for solo performers specifically, I think I'll take this opportunity to talk about solo performers. And, I think the ideal solo performer sort of candidate and fellow for us is someone that has had at least, a couple sort of things under their belt. Like this isn't the opportunity necessarily to like say, I want to try to be a solo performer. Let me figure that out within this fellowship. I think that we're excited by folks that have a practice of being a solo performer and can point to that in their application. So if this is something that's sort of on the newer side, then maybe applying for one of the residencies, if you have access to that, makes sense. And then as you continue to develop yourself as a solo performer within a year or two, maybe it makes sense to apply that. But that's my 2 cents. I don't know.
Yeah. And to add to that, no, I totally agree. But also to add to that, this opportunity, as I said, is also, as Leah mentioned, a way for you to engage with New York Theater Workshop artistically, not just to work on I mean, you can work on a project, but if your mission is only to spend the year developing just a project and you're not interested in learning the inner workings of how New York Workshop works administratively, or being in a cohort, or expanding beyond that project in your artistry, then definitely the development and the residence and the summer residencies may be more of what we would invite you to apply for. So yeah, so if it's only project centric, I would recommend, my 2 cents is to lean in on the other developmental opportunities. But if you are looking at this opportunity as how, yes, you can develop a project, but how you can grow as an artist and how you can learn, not learn, but just get more and understand a little bit the inner workings of how American theater works and also how we work at the workshop, this is when we found the most valuable and meaningful experience with our fellows.
I would just add to like thinking back to the question of like what were some of the goals that I wrote. I actually wrote in my goals, I can't remember in which document, but in one of them that I wanted to go to the artistic planning meetings because I wanted to deeply understand how a theater company programs a season. And so like even that is a specific goal.
Thank you. I clicked that answer to question, but I'll answer it. The question is, plays with music, musicals, operettas, mixed media projects, are those appropriate for the scope of the fellowship? Yes, absolutely. I think that we are often thinking expansively of what fits in with the bubble of theater. I think there needs to be a sort of like a guiding light, a sort of foundational theatricality to a project. But we've certainly had many people do plays with music, musicals, and I'll sort of use that and dovetail that into another question, which I think someone was asking about reimagined classics, if we support that within the fellowship. We certainly do, right? Like, you know, a playwright will often be doing new work, or a playwright can be working on an adaptation. Directors can be excited about new work, or directors can be excited about, actually, I want to really take this classic play or classic musical and crack it open. Eileen Munn-McGrady, a wonderful fellow, a directing fellow, said that she wanted to take The Music Man, rip it all apart, and put it back together. And it was one of the best fellowship sharings that we've seen in a while. Like, it was really exciting, right? So New York Theater Workshop also, in its sort of programming and it's like in its season, has historically also really sort of valued the reimagining of classics. So definitely that is totally cool within the context of the fellowship. Do applicants need to be based in New York City, or is it possible to participate if not based in New York? I think folks that are not based in New York are welcome to apply, but I think in order to have a successful fellowship experience, you know, there is an expectation that you do be here in the city because you will have the monthly fellowship meetings, but also you are expected and required to attend the fellow sharings of your fellow cohort, right? So it's like you have the monthly meetings, you have Andrew's fellow sharing, you have Salma's fellow sharing. So these are all different touch points that you're expected to be at. And so I think that that becomes a little bit untenable if you're outside of the city. You know, there's sort of flexibility there, obviously, if you're somewhere that's sort of more commutable, but I think the easier, simpler answer is that like we really are looking for folks that can be based in the city so that they can actually be engaging in the fellowship to the fullest extent. You know, in this current cohort, we've actually had a couple people that relocated for the fellowship, you know, which of course is not easy, but they did it. And so that is that answer there. There's also a question about group interviews. How do group interviews go? Also, why a group interview first? What a great question. You know, group interviews are they're kind of great. They're structured. We'll send you a predetermined question. Spoiler alert, it's like talk about a piece of theater that was moving to you and why. And like we get to hear from everyone. Like Andrew will tell me what piece of theater really moved him and why. Salma will tell me a piece of theater that really moved her and why. And like we'll make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. We'd then like ask another sort of animating artistic aesthetic question, and then we sort of more loosely have conversation flow. And I think we choose to do this first because it's an opportunity for us to meet more people at once, and then also to get to see how folks sort of engage in a group setting. And it also gives us more sort of data to sort of process for each applicant, so that when we get to the individual interview at the end, we're able to ask more specific questions of you and of your artistry. So that is why we do it first. Let me scroll through. I'm checking time. We have a few minutes left. Can you use some of the stipend for film work? I feel like if you were to ask me that question as a fellow, I'd be like, is there anything else you can work on within theater first? You know, it's pretty loose what you can use the fund for, right? Like I think the underlying thing is it for your artistic development? And so I think that if you were trying to explore some film work, we could have a conversation about that. You know, one of Miranda Heyman, who was a fellow in 2019, 2020, what they used some of their fund for is they wanted to take a DJ class, right? Because they wanted to expand their sort of artistry as a whole. And so they took a DJ class, they took a floral arrangement class. So there's certainly flexibility. And also I just want to be careful that this is like a sort of a theater fellowship, and that you know, I'm sure there are other opportunities for film work. So it's sort of all in conversation as much of the spending of the fellowship fund is, but there's wiggle room there. I think it's just a case by case basis. Let's see. If you become a fellow, is your project guaranteed a platform at New York Theater Workshop? You're guaranteed a fellowship work sharing, and that is sort of a work in process developmental sharing. And but that's sort of the extent of what that is, right? And the artistic staff is invited. We usually invite the staff, the board, the usual suspects. So, you know, there is a sort of turnout for whatever this wants to be. But there's no sort of guarantee, or it doesn't sort of parlay into anything further explicitly. In the application process, are submitting screenplays acceptable too? I would say no. I would say we really want to see your theatrical artistry. So the film medium is very different than the sort of play and stage medium. So we're looking for plays, not screenplays. Sarah Shin. Hi, Sarah. How are you? If you're still here. Sarah's curious if we can speak to more on what generative artist means for directors. Does redeveloping, re-envisioning produced work count, or are you thinking about just new plays? I think that sort of gets to what we're talking about classics. You know, it's about, you know, a generative artist, a director can have a generative artistry even within a new play, right? Like they can have a playwright that they're working on a play with, but like they have a very sort of forward vision that like is sort of animating and driving the development and creation of the process. Or it's you're taking a text that already exists or something that's already produced and really sort of adding your artistic or directorial vision to it. Salma, do you see any other questions? I'm like going through all these questions. I'm like,
There is a question about accessibility.
yes, let me see.
If applicants have a physical disability and need physically accessible spaces, can your theater workshop, the cohort, accommodate applicants with physical disability?
I think so. I think yes. I think that you know, we are very value and mission aligned in a lot of what we do, and also our space is our space, and there are certain fire codes and sort of obstacles with getting our space to be more ADA accessible. That's sort of a shortcoming that we recognize and that we don't sort of take for granted. And so I think that if there were someone with a physical disability that wanted to apply and ultimately become a fellow, I think that we would obviously work with them to figure out what are accommodations such that the cohort can still be meeting. If you need an accessible space for your work sharings, that's all stuff that we would be happy to figure out. Someone asked, if a selected candidate chooses not to relocate but commutes, how frequently are they expected to be there for meetings? Again, the only sort of mandatory or expected portions are the monthly fellowship meetings. So those are happening one Monday a month. And you get that schedule of Mondays sort of before the fellowship even starts over the summer. And then it would be for the other fellows sort of work sharings. And those are also scheduled well enough in advance, at least a month in advance, so that you can put them in your calendar and prioritize them. But beyond that, in terms of like weekly department meetings, there's not an expectation that you go to those. It's sort of just an offering. But yeah, so it's the monthly fellowship meetings and each other's fellow sharings.
Yeah, and also to name, not mandatory, but a lot of our fellows like to attend the Mondays at 3 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as Leah mentioned, like what is expected is once a month in the fellow sharings, but if you're interested to be more engaged in that, then I would say once a week. Dividing them between the Mondays at 3 and the and the departmental meetings that we have and the staff meetings that we have.
Great. There are a few questions that talk about like playwright, director, if you're a multi-hyphenate, you know, and we understand and expect that many folks are multi-hyphenates. If you identify as both a playwright and a director, we do ask that you sort of choose one as your primary sort of artistic focus. I do recognize that that might be difficult for some folks, and some folks are pretty sort of 50-50 split. But as you sort of engage in the application process, it just makes it easier for you to sort of like apply as either director or as a playwright. And so like if you're submitting a play as a playwright, but you're hoping that you can direct it yourself, that should be fine. That's not an issue. But at the point of the application, we will ask you to choose one over the other. There's a couple questions about the fellowship being open to instrumentalists. If you want to email, we can have a further conversation about that, because I don't know if I know the full context there, but like, again, we're thinking of generative artists. So that's a playwright writing a new play or making an adaptation. That's a director who has an idea about a classical player who is really helping develop and move forward a new play, or a solo performer who is, you know, developing a piece of work that they're going to perform themselves. So on first read and instinct, I would say the instrumentalists, this isn't quite the right fellowship for them. But if you think otherwise, of course, apply, and then happy to be convinced otherwise. But that would be my gut answer there. I think, Shalom, if you want to start answering this question as I call through maybe one or two more, but what is the ideal artist statement? Tips you can provide in creating one, you or Andrew, if you have any tips about artist statements.
Well, as I may have briefly touched on earlier, it's one that allows us to know you as an artist and what is interesting to you, but also how your work is in conversation with our values as a theater company, and the questions that you ask yourself and the questions that you're interested in and your wildest idea, and your wildest dream, I think, and what inspires you. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I would say 100% everything you just said, because we want to be able to read this personal or artistic statement and get to know who you are, right? So like even though we're not necessarily seeing your work, we should be able to say, "Oh, I can see this person's aesthetics, artistic aesthetics. I can see the kind of work that they're going to create. I can see how they might operate in a cohort." And I deeply, deeply understand them just by reading this, 2-page statement.
And like, what is your artistic voice without us reading the sample of your work?
Right. I think we have time for like one or two more questions. So I don't know if we'll get to all of them. For folks that are still here, if your question was not answered in the Q&A, please just email fellowshipinfo@nytw.org, and we're happy to answer via email. How many actually apply for the fellowship? If it's helpful to give a range, I don't know if it's helpful or not, but it can range anywhere from like 250 to like 350. It just depends on the year. But at the first stage, that's the numbers that we often get, somewhere between that. What are you looking for in a resume? Strictly artistic or administrative leaning resumes? Okay, if it provides scope of different roles you've engaged in within the theater. I think if you are sort of someone that's straddled both, it is helpful to include that. It's helpful to have context for you as a sort of holistic person, and know what other roles you've had within theater, even if they're not directly artistic. A couple more questions have sort of drummed up about residing in New York City or not, or rural applicants. Folks are welcome to apply regardless of where they live in the country or in the world. But again, in order to really capitalize on some of the sort of expectations and the resources of the fellowship, we find that folks that live in the city or near the city are best suited for being a fellow. So that's sort of what I would say there. If you're generating a project, does New York Theater Workshop help you pair a director? Yes, if you're a playwright that's working on a new play and you don't necessarily have collaborators identified, we're happy to help you introduce you to folks and help you find collaborators on a project. Will New York Theater Workshop help us secure production rights for a play for stage reading and rehearsals? The short answer is no, but a lot of these sort of worked processes are really internal and they're not open to the public. They're not publicized. We don't sell tickets or anything. So oftentimes there's a little bit of leeway of what you can work on, sort of in the name of or under the umbrella of development. Certainly as you continue to develop a piece, for example, Eileen did The Music Man for the purposes of the workshop, because we weren't publicizing because we weren't sort of outward facing, it was fine. But should she want to continue to develop it and eventually have a production somewhere, she would have to then sort of go into the process of getting the rights. But for the purposes of development, there's a little bit of flexibility there.
But what we can offer, but we can offer is that you will have access and connections with everyone that works at the workshop. So if that's a question that you have to our producing team on, like, just to get advice on how to carry on with this in the future, this is a chance that you may be able to pick their brains on what's the best route for it. But it's not a thing that we're going to secure, but we have resources that can help you think about it as you pursue it beyond that.
Thank you. That's a good note. Claudia Mollet has a question if there's a director that's really early and has done a lot of assistant associate work, but not really as a director themselves. We often have folks that have really heavy sort of assistant associate resumes. It's important to try to find ways to articulate yourself as a director in your own right, and like where you've had opportunities to do that. Certainly any sort of individual directing would be helpful, even if it's not as robust as maybe your associate or assistant directing experience. But again, early career is really sort of flexible. So we encourage folks to apply and sort of articulate where they think they are in their process and where they think they have room to grow. Great. I think that is where we'll end because we're a few minutes over. Again, if we didn't get to your question in the Q&A, please feel free to just follow up via email and email fellowshipinfo@nytw.org. If you have any questions that are specific to myself or Salma, our emails are leoa or salmaz@nytw.org. Salma and I both look at this inbox for any questions that come in throughout the process. Again, preliminary applications are due Thursday, October 17th by midnight. Please make sure you're getting your applications in before then. Thank you so much for those that stuck to the end. Thank you so much for all the excellent questions. We really look forward to getting to know you via this process. And again, thank you for the work that you're going to embark on as you go through this application process. And a big thank you to Andrew for taking the time to hang out and chat with us.
Thanks
Thank you all
for
so much.
Thank you.